Hello and welcome to Jam Session Recording 152. My name is Dani Beaumont and I am a Principal Product Manager on the Adobe Muse team. Today I am joined by lots of friendly faces there in the chat. I'm also joined by Razvan Korlik. He is one of our senior engineers on the Muse team. He is kindly covering for Laurel, who's on vacation this week. And Razvan has done wonderful work with scroll effects, so you can secretly ask him questions if you have them. Probably not the best time for feature requests, but you can try. Welcome, Razvan. We'll go ahead and get started on this session. So I will begin sharing my screen too. Let's see if I can get this cleaned up just a little bit. So as many of you know, we started using YouTube to post the recorded sessions. As such, you cannot click on this resources link in YouTube. So what I will do is put into the chat pod real quickly here a tiny URL to today's session. If you're watching the recording, you got to type that into the browser. But these are resources that we make available as I work on the session. For you to follow up with. So with that said, let's go ahead and start sharing my screen. As we work, Razvan will help me out with chat and keep an eye on questions that you have. You're welcome to ask questions about what we're talking about. You're welcome to also ask questions off topic. This is our opportunity to learn from you as well as you learn from us. That's why we call it a jam session. So no worries if we're talking about something different. If you do want to make sure for the topic that I'm covering, I try to get to a question you have, you can put that into the presenters area for questions. So if you are new to Muse, I'll have to do this kind of quickly. Some folks there did suggest they were new to the application. There are a number of places to go to get started with the app. So if you go to the Adobe website in the products area, I'll even go there now. So adobe.com under products, under Muse, there's been a lot of work in the last year towards learn and support in making our help and support content much more discoverable. So that learn and support tab, if you click on show all tutorials, there's an awful lot of content that is available there. I don't even know if Razvan knows, but last week we pushed live under key techniques some fresh recordings around a variety of scroll effects. All the way from motion, opacity, slideshow animation, and we added layers and text. So that's a clean recording with a clean demo asset. If you ever have to teach the feature, you can grab that asset from the live instance of the site and play with it. This continues to be just a good space to look for tutorials that are more video in nature. Another great place to find help and support within the app is literally within the app. So if I were in the Muse application and said File New, for example, notice here under Resolution, I can select whether I want this site to be HiDPI or not. There's a check mark here that if I click that is going to take me to a tutorial. This is a written tutorial, but the best part about that is if English is not your first language, any of our tutorials that we have will be translated into the 18 languages that Adobe Muse supports. So it's a nice place to go for articles that have been translated. And that's by way of in-app help, clicking on these question marks as you go along here. So great place to hang. Another one is the microsite, as we call it, which is not hosted on adobe.com directly. It's muse.adobe.com, so it's a subdirectory of adobe.com, but it's built predominantly in Adobe Muse. The events tab is a great place to see all of the events that we have going on. As I mentioned a little bit ago, we're starting to put our recordings actually up on YouTube.
When
it's going to be, sorry, that's me talking about last week's jam. But you're welcome to come follow this. If you click on, I think, me here, you can follow the work. The recordings will be posted here. It's awfully nice, I think, to put it on an iPad and watch while you're trying to do work within the application. So nice options there because they are iOS compatible, if that's the world you live in. We also have a number of videos that don't quite fit in the CC Learn area that we're posting here that you can watch more directly. So come on by, feel free to subscribe and watch the videos that are there. We welcome your feedback as that YouTube channel sort of evolves a little bit. So with that said, today's focus is on optimizing your content for high-resolution devices, high DPI devices. And as usual, I do need to start out a little bit slowly. for the hour that we're going to work with today. So I'm here in Adobe Muse, and when it's time to create a new site, as I kind of tipped my hand here, you can set the resolution that you're going to work with. Now, we're all witnessing an evolution around screen resolutions. It's quite a moving target. The Apple products, Retina displays, for example, have what we call 2x or double resolution, and I'll explain this a little bit. You have the ability when you're working to kind of keep that as an option by supporting high DPI or 2x resolution displays. Now, before I jump into that, I do want to mention that there's two ways that high DPI comes into play. One is if you're a Muse designer and you use Muse on either a Mac or a Windows machine, and that application is running on a high DPI device, that being your computer as you're designing in Muse. We recently pushed out an update that supports high DPI, I think 4K monitors on Windows. There was sort of a bug fix that we put out just this past week that allows you, I think, to set the resolution of your Windows display when you're running Muse. So if you didn't see that dot release, we did push out a formal update in February, but we've just pushed out a dot release last week, and that does have a fix for 4K displays, PCs that are running the Muse application. Having said all of that, my intention now is to build out a website, and I'd like the option of supporting high-resolution devices. So I can come in and select that here. It's going to kind of warn me a little bit, and if I say I want to go ahead and do that, I can learn more about what this means. That's going to take me to that same tutorial, just so that I understand kind of the consequences of what I've just done. Another thing you're welcome to do is go back to an old site and change it to high DPI. So for today's session, I actually am going to work on the Ike's design. And interestingly enough, Ike's was not designed originally as high DPI. So that's something that I need to go back and work into the app. So I'm opening up, or into the website, I'm opening up that design. So this is without high DPI enabled. And see if I can kind of show this in action a little bit. If I come into an individual page, you'll notice that I have a graphic that's been placed here. This graphic has a background fill applied to it. Another graphic I've got here, also background fill. So to be honest, for this design, we're not going to see a huge adjustment when I go to high DPI, and we'll talk about that. But let's go ahead and come into the application here in the site plan. And under Home, I'm going to just create a new page. So I'll go on in and add a new page that I want to work with, and we're going to work here in this spot. What I'll do to change the resolution to be high DPI, since I did not do it originally, is pull that under File to Site Properties. And in Site Properties under Content, you'll notice that I have a resolution option here. I guess I did this morning, still waking up folks, and switch that to high DPI. So you can always toggle that here. We're going to talk about this feature. I do want to point out up front, though, that even when you decide your site, quote unquote, will be high resolution, high DPI supporting, you do not have to do that to every single image in your site. You can pick and choose what you think needs to be that 2x resolution and what shouldn't. So I'll go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to come on into a page, and let's just kind of look at some of the basics that we're talking about here with high DPI. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my guides and simplify things a little bit. Now, as I work with high DPI enabled, this is one of those things that kind of requires a bit of a brain adjustment. And if you have more questions about this, I do encourage you in that tutorials area that I've given you, the high DPI article that we've written, that basic help article, explains this a little bit more thoroughly. But interestingly enough, when you're 2xing the resolution of a device, of an item, and basically what you're doing is making it twice the amount of pixels, but not twice the amount in size, depending on how you design, that can be complex. So in a nutshell, if you like to create images and content in, let's say, Photoshop, And as you're working, you say File New, Photoshop, and you set it to be 72 dpi, let's say. What you're going to want to do is double the resolution in Photoshop. So you're going to say File New, and the screen resolution should be 144. So twice that dots per inch in essence, that resolution, but scale back to 50% of actual size. So what you're effectively doing is it's allowing you to see items at the resolution that they'll be displayed on the web, which is 50% of actual size or double the resolution. All right, I know that was incredibly complicated and probably didn't help, so let me just try to show this. I'm going to come in and place some elements. So I'll pull down and say File, Place. I'm going to go to a directory that I have here with some HiDPI elements. So for this example, I'm going to use a couple of pieces. I've got an image, a photo, and if I hit the spacebar on a Mac, it's going to open it up at screen resolution 72 dpi. So notice how large this image is. It's rather big in height and width. And in this example, it's saved out as a JPEG. It could be a PNG or a GIF. And I've also got 3 graphic elements here. So I've got a bug, I've got this gift package, and I've got the heart. Now these are image files. They're PNGs with transparency enabled. And you can see the size, 256 by 256. Now we're going to talk about different types of content in the types of file type you'll want to work with. For these 3 examples, I'm using them because it's very easy to see how crisp they are. But there's a lot of reason these days why you would probably, if you have access to the vector content here, if you had this as, let's say, Adobe Illustrator, you would probably want to import this as SVG, which is scalable vector graphics. It really takes away any worry about resolution. For now, though, to show this example, I'm going to start with these 4 image files. I'm going to come in and select them. With the place gun here, I'll just go ahead and click and release to place each instance of these images. I'll put this guy right here. This is a tough one to show over Connect, which is why watching the YouTube recording is a good thing, because you don't have Connect kind of getting in the middle of your work. But I have these 3 items that I've now placed on the canvas. And if I come in to look at these items in my Assets panel, see if I can find this easily. I've got the image soup.jpg or JPEG, and it's a 2x resolution file. Now, if you remember with me when we looked at it in the Finder, if we look at that one more time in the Finder here, notice that that file was twice the resolution. It's rather large in height and width, twice the size. Sorry, I'm tongue-tied this morning for some reason. Take another sip of coffee. So what's happened is when Muse finds an image that's to be placed and you've enabled HiDPI, Muse is going to automatically place that file at 50% of actual size. Notice when I drag the edges here, I can see that it was set at 50%. Interestingly enough, if in my design I want these items to be HiDPI, but for whatever reason I don't want another item, this image, to be HiDPI, I just don't think it's worth it, let's say, for a photo. What I can do is just drag that image and make sure, notice that it's now, I'm going to drag it to about 52%, but I want you to look over on the right there at what's happening in the display. At 52%, there's no 2x indicator anymore. If I swing back down to 50%, 49%, anywhere in that neighborhood, up until the 50% threshold, I get a 2x indicator. Anything larger than that, it's no longer 2x. So if in your site, half of the images are really important to you, that they be clean and crisp, make sure when you place them, you have at least double the data available. Place it at 50% or less. If you don't want the 2x rendering, just make sure that you place a lower res image or scale it to more than 50%. All right, at this point, I now want to kind of test to see what this does in the browser. And I've said it in the past, I'll even say it again, but there are features that when I hear about it from the engineering team, I may or may not have thought that it was a good idea to do. And HiDPI made me very anxious, because what we're saying for a moment is for all 4 of these images, we're going to have Muse render the 1x instance and the 2x instance. The 1x instance is going to be what I'm looking at, so it's going to be this height and width at 72 DPI. But the 2x instance is going to be 4 times larger because it's twice as tall, twice as wide. So you're in essence saying, instead of downloading images once, I'm going to download 5 times the data instead of 1 times data, because it's going to generate the 2x instances, it's going to upload the 2x instances, and then when the viewer watches it in the browser, it's going to download twice that image content. I mentioned I probably wouldn't have done this, but I would have been wrong, because in actuality, this behaves very, very well in the browser in a seamless way that's almost difficult to pick up on. So because of that, for testing purposes, and in theory, let's say you've got a viewer of your website that's on an iOS device. Let's say they're on their iPhone and they're in a bandwidth constraint environment and they really don't care about the integrity of your images. We allow you in the browser to put a toggle that allows the viewer to decide whether or not those double X, those 2X images should be downloaded or not. So I'm going to add a button for the purposes of testing. I could keep it in the finished design, but we're just going to use it as a testing feature here. I'm going to go over to the widgets library, and under buttons, I'm going to select HiDPI on off, and I'm going to press and drag it onto the canvas. I'm going to do a second instance of it because I want to explain this just for a second. This button, this is the default state of a button that we're delivering. So in the widget library there, under buttons, HiDPI. Now we've given you not the most attractive button ever, but it is a default button that you're welcome to customize. So what you'll notice is with the button selected, if I go into the states panel here and select that button, you'll notice that I have actually more states than we're all used to in the Muse world. So Muse generally has 4 states for every object: up, over, down, and active. In the instance of this button, we're actually creating a toggle. So you have off, on, and unavailable, and you have up, over, and down states for that toggle button. Just to illustrate, I have a different graphic I could use here. So under the fill dropdown with it selected, I'm going to come on in and select an image. So you'll notice that we had that little HD. This is a graphic for us. I'm going to go ahead and select toggle down, or off in essence. So my off state. And then let's come on in here and switch to another state. I've got for off. I'm going to go ahead and delete any rollover states because I don't really need them. And then I'm just going to change the on state to be a different graphic. So I'll come in and grab the green little toggle for the on state. And then I'm going to delete any inheritance here, skip it for rollover, skip it for mouse down. And then lastly, the HiDPI unavailable. I'll explain that. I'm going to come on in and grab just a grayed out version of the toggle, not available. So these are now the same exact functionality, this one and this one. I've just got different graphics being used for the design. Now let me explain how this would actually sort of work in nature. I'm going to do a bad design thing here, and I'm going to go ahead and pin these guys up in the corner because I am over connect and it's hard for you to see what's going on. I'm going to exaggerate it quite a lot. So let's put these two guys closer to one another. And I'm going to now preview the file in the browser. So pull that on File to Preview Page in Browser. Muse is going to render the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it's going to render the instances of these images. Now you'll notice you don't know, but I'm on a MacBook Pro. It is a Retina device, and by default, what Muse did there is rendered both the standard and the HiDPI image instances. And with this toggle button, it's going to be defaulted to on. I can set that default state, but it defaults to on. If I go ahead and click, and this is where I'm going to zoom something awful, which is why I've pinned my buttons so that I can keep an eye on them. Keep your eye on this area here, and it's really hard to see the photo, so let's go out just a little bit. But if you look at the edges of this graphic element, and you look at some of the fuzziness, the details here, If I toggle to HD off, what you'll notice is I've got a lot more jaggies in here. If I zoom in and exaggerate it even more, see how I get jagged edges there. I can toggle back to on. And what happens, this is kind of why it's worth pointing out, is as a designer, when I'm doing this work, I'm making a decision for my clients. But the way the HiDPI feature works, I think, is beautiful and very unobtrusive. So if I were loading this page on, let's say it was a bandwidth constrained site, and as a viewer of the site, this toggle was on, I made it available. What will happen is the first time that the page loads, it's going to come through and load every graphic element at standard resolution. So everything on the page would load in this manner. Very quickly, when the bandwidth is available, we would download those second 2x images and just asynchronously, in the same way I'm toggling here, toggling it off. It's really hard for you to tell, but you can test this yourself. Toggling it on, I get this asynchronous update of each individual image at that higher resolution. So I don't see a refresh at all. I don't see a big line wipe across the screen. It just is very subtly bringing in the higher res instances of those images. So my feeling is go for it. It can't really hurt if when you're designing your site, you don't mind, let's say the upload time, the first time you upload those 2x images may be more time consuming. But for there on in, it's really up to the display to determine if it's something that can be viewed, and up to the bandwidth to pull in those higher res images. Now there was the unavailable state. I'm not able to show it to you on my monitor, but if I were to drag this over to my tabletop monitor, my desk monitor where I sit, that monitor is not HiDPI. And that gray version of this toggle switch, or the HD button, would be visible there, basically showing me I don't have the ability to see the high definition instances because my display won't allow it. If you actually use a variation of this button, you can change it so that the unavailable instance is just empty. You can have no image there, so that if the viewer of your site is on a standard display and has no retina available to them, they're not going to even see the option to trigger anything, because it's just not available to them. So that's like a nice way to make it available to the people that have high definition displays, while not hurting those that don't. I'm just going to remain tongue-tied today, I think. Time for another sip of coffee. All right, so looks like Razvan's in there covering chat pretty well, so I'm going to keep blowing through this. So that was specifically jumping into images. And I did caveat this. This feature's been around for us for a little while, and since that time, since we delivered HiDPI, we've really expanded a couple other ways that I would encourage you to optimize content on your site around graphic elements, let's say. So they really were a number of baby steps, and you can make decisions as you're working here as to what it is that you want to do in your design. So let's kind of leave this here as just test elements. I'm going to kind of move these guys down on the page. And let's come on in and grab some other elements. So when you're working, you really want to stop and think hard about the original content that you're producing. And if you look at that list of resources that I've given you, there's a number of resources. New York Times has an article that says every millisecond that goes by when people are looking at your website, if they're unable to load the content of your page, the chance that they're going to just leave and say forget it grows exponentially with every little millisecond that goes by. So if you don't want to read the articles in a nutshell, make sure that every single design element that you're placing on the page will load as quickly as possible with the greatest fidelity around the visual content. So let's just do, I'm thinking to myself, we're going to do a little bit of work with typography just for a second. So let me go steal some Ike's stuff. And this is probably a very odd, older version of Ike's. I'm going to go to the other one. All right, and just steal a little bit of text because I'm feeling lazy. So I'm going to come in and copy that. And here in the design canvas, I'm just going to paste it in. So I have some text that's here. You probably know all about this, but I'm just going to do a quick little refresher on text. If in this first instance, typographically, what just happened there? Let's go to this guy. This first instance, when it comes to fonts, I have some choices. And if you look at this, we have kind of an accordion structure. There's recently used web fonts, web safe, and system fonts. And system fonts, it says really clearly they're going to export as images. So let's say I want to introduce graphic elements into my design. And I found this great little font that has all sorts of pretty cute little graphics that I want to work with. Especially that little sunshine, gotta love it. So I may decide that I really would like these two guys. And I'll scale them larger. Because these are desktop fonts, they are going to render as images. So if I preview in browser really quickly, if I were to look at the source on these pages, this is a graphic. If I came into view page source, wow, got a lot on the page, but let me just see. Yeah, remember that stuff down in the footer? I'm going to not bother trying to find it right now. But these are going to be graphic elements. If instead, as I'm working, I want to have icons on my site, there's really two decisions you can make. The first question is, are these icons you're going to use over and over again as a designer for a particular client or as a whole? If so, you may want to take the time to actually, like this example, create a font. But instead of a desktop font that's going to be rasterized, you can create a font of icons that will be scalable. Just like SVG, they're a typeface, so they're like a font, but they have vector content that will scale to the appropriate resolution of the device that you're working on. So to do that real quickly, if you go to Fontello, for example, I think, yes, icon font generator. When you're working, if you know the range of icons that you need, you can come in and say, you know, I really need a thumbs up and a thumbs down. I need this arrow and a cute little sound on and sound off, because these are icons that I use on a regular basis. And with those selected, I can come in and customize how those names appear. This is really just a code thing, but it does show me the set that I have here. With those icons selected, I can now come in and give it a name. I might call this Dani's Handy Icons. And notice that I can then download a web font. I can actually download what I need to make this a typeface that's available across all of my designs. So once I come in and download that as a web font, I can pull that on File here to add and remove web fonts. And in the self-hosted web font instance, I can go and add that particular font. Now, you guys know I manage this rowing club's website, and I did exactly this. I went in and created a font icon set, and I've loaded that in as a self-hosted web font, so that now as I'm working, let's say I decide that I want to just add something here that's an icon that I want to include. So I'm going to come on in and just grab these guys. If I go into my glyphs panel, this is really important because I'm going to not really know what keyboard commands I need for those icons. I really don't care because I do have the glyphs panel. I can go in and select that font. So here's the PRC font. I can view these larger, but notice I've got a whole series of icons that I can work with. So I've got a little map icon. I can come in and size it or scale it to anything specifically that I'd like. I can come in and change the color of the font by choosing a color that I may have defined as a swatch color across the site, or just any individual color value. And this, unlike these guys, will remain resolution independent. So if I put it on my phone layout, my desktop layout, my tablet layout, it's going to have one asset, one typeface in essence, that's going to be uploaded with the site. One thing you do want to point out is if you take this approach, you're going to want to really only include the icons that you know that you need. because when I FTP or publish up to my hosting platform, Muse is going to upload the whole font. So all of the icons that I'm showing you here will be uploaded. It's not subsetting it to only the icons that I've used in the design. So just definitely something you'll want to keep in mind. Another terrific way to work is just pure SVG. If I happen to have these icons as Illustrator source or SVG, if it's something I've downloaded from the web, I can just work with them directly. So an example of something that's nice in SVG would be the logo that I'm working here. If I come in and say File Place, and I select, let's see, from my Ikes directory, let's take a look. It was here not long ago, I swear it. Okay, so let's say I want to work with this logo. I can press and drag. This is an SVG element. You'll notice I just clicked and released. It was designed in a rather large size, but that's okay. I can come in and resize the item. There's no such thing as 2x for this. If I look at it in the Assets panel, it's not going to give me that indicator because it's truly a resolution independent element. I don't need to. Actually, it's kind of funny. It is showing it's 2x, but it is pretty irrelevant. If I were to bring this in, just seeing what Muse wants to do here, even if I were to make it much larger, Muse is not going to create two instances of this icon. Because it's SVG, it will always render at screen resolution. If I blow it out really large, notice how it's a little jaggy for a second, and then we're going to go in and grab an updated poster image there for that vector content. So if we come on in and look at this hodgepodge of design that we have, I've got a logo. I can tell it's resolution independent. If I obscenely resize this content here, notice how Mr. Sun here is getting kind of jagged looking because this is that first font that's resolution dependent. It's a desktop font, but it's made from graphic elements that are going to be flattened as images. As I come along, my text is selectable. It's resolution independent. So is this custom font, icon font that I did with Fontello. And as I zoom in and get really nauseous looking at my logo here, I can see that it's always staying clear and clean. And if I looked at the code that was generated, let's go back to actual size here. The code that's being generated, there'll only be one instance of Ikes Bikes across desktop, smartphone, and tablet, and across resolutions. All right, I'm going to stop and check chat and see how things are going. I see Dana joined, so you guys have double the power. You have a test engineer, and you have a development engineer here. Again, I'm not positive what's already been answered. I don't know if our guys have dealt with the search function. So just kind of taking random questions. There are widgets in the widget directory that talk about search. Having built-in search, there are things that the Muse team has done to make sure that you can host on any hosting platform you'd like. So forms, for example. Another one would be search. Another one would be copy protecting pages. Because we do not have a back-end database to rely on, because we let you publish anywhere, it's harder to do some things. Levi's saying, shut up, I've already been told the answer. Is that what you're saying? Fine. But all of those elements that do require a back-end database make things trickier. So trying to put a password on a page, if we don't have a database on the back end to compare usernames and password, it's hard for us to implement that type of security for a page. For search, some of those widgets do well, and I'd like to get feedback around the extent to which you can customize that and how happy you are with those widgets from the folks in the community. So did anybody cover the easy reader mode on my Muse site? Any suggestions? That's new to me. So if you want to send me mail and tell me a little bit more about easy reader mode, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if that's for visually impaired folks or not. Let's see, just skipping along here. Okay, we talked about the shift already. Okay, right, Levi answered the question. Let's keep going. Just thinking for a minute here. I blew through that pretty fast, folks. Let's keep talking, though. I've got some other tricks up my sleeve. Let's get most of this content, move it down a little lower. Let's say I wanted to place an image, and I want to define it as a background fill. When I do that work, and Razvan is welcome to come in and correct me, this is why we call it a jam session, or Dana, they both are smarter than me. If I press and drag a container here and decide to make it 100% width, let's say I want to do an effect. I'm going to work with a couple images. And let's do this. Let's make my life a little easier. I'm going to say File, New. We'll go ahead and go with a HiDPI site. As you're testing, I encourage you to just do this. If you can isolate the code, so to speak, or isolate the design, it makes trying to analyze what's going on a little easier. So I'm starting with a blank page, and I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to grab an image, and I'm just going to press and drag it on the canvas. Now this is a very large image. You'll see that it's only 21% of actual size, so it's going to get a 2x rendering there. Next to it, though, I'm going to come on in and do a 100% width object that I want to fill with an image. And let's say I've got the chain break image. No, that's too small. Let's try somebody else. Bike pedals, anyone? Oh, jeepers. This'll do. Let's try the sign. Nope, keep picking small stuff. I know, let's go by size. Excellent. So I got this nice huge gear here, and I'm placing it on the page, and I can decide where it's going to work here. But let's say I want to do that oh so fancy scroll effect. So I'm going to have it actually scale to fill the container, or fit actually. Fill, and I need something bigger, so bear with me. Let's try this guy. I swear I did this earlier this morning and it was just fine. Okay, so I have an image now, and let's compare them. In the first example, I just said File, Place. In the second, I created a container and I filled with an image that I'm saying Scale to Fill. What I want to do is that kind of very popular background scroll effect. So with my object here under Fill, there's this nice little hidden fill scroll effect that I can define. I'm going to turn on motion, and I'm going to actually have it scroll at 0.8 times the speed of scroll in a downward direction. And come on in and take a look at my finished design. So what I have happening is a very short page, so I need to make this longer. And come into Page Properties, and let's make it about 5,000 pixels. Try this again. As I scroll, notice that's kind of a little wacko because you're seeing a really tight view of this guy right here. Let's make it a little larger so you get a little bit more action. So I got that first instance and I've got a second instance, and it's sort of moving at a different speed of scroll in the background there. Interestingly enough, even if I had the 2x resolution in it, and this is where Razvan's welcome to correct me here, but from what I understand, when I'm defining something as scale to fill, we only have so much information about the resolution of the device you're working on. So we're going to max out the resolution here, but because the image is scaling, it's not exactly known the size that would be needed, so that I believe we just put out, this is where you guys are supposed to jump in, but I believe we put out one image if it's a background fill with scale to fill rather than more than one. If we come in and look at this website now, and we go in and view the page source, my expectation is that first image is going to occur twice. So we've got images contact JPEG. If I take a look at that, there's that first instance, and notice it's just contact.jpg. But if you look at the code, in addition to that first instance, I've got data HiDPI source with a 2x JPEG. So this is going to, and then notice the dimensions here. This is going to, when that HiDPI image is available, when that HiDPI display is available, it will come in and bring in that 2x instance. The background fill image, though, will probably just be the one. This is where I get to find out if I'm lying. So Dana's linked you to the article. This is one of the articles that we have down here as well. So there's Muse Help Creating High-Resolution Websites, kind of one in the same article, but definitely good to track. I'm reading here. Huh. Okay. All right, what other tricks do I have up my sleeve? Talked a little bit about SVG. We talked about using fonts. As you play around with that, there are decisions and options that you'll want to consider, right? So if I come back to this page, talk a little bit more about just icons and your options that you have here. With these set of icons, let's kind of make our SVG a little less obscenely big. I can define SVG as a background image. I can define alternate text on SVG. So if I come in to edit image properties, I may want to make sure that there's an alt tag for visually impaired folks that says Ike's Bikes logo. So that will show up in the code, even though Ike's Bikes is a graphic. One of the things I've started thinking about a little bit is around typography and the extent to which you can have rich typographic controls while still adhering to web standards. So if I came in, for example, and wanted to have a nice Ike's Bikes logo, let's say I started with this guy here, I'm going to come in and apply a paragraph style. Let's see. That'll do. I'm going to make it rather larger. Because this is, again, resolution independent, I may want to jazz this up a little bit. I'm going to copy and paste that image. I'm going to offset it a little bit. And I'm going to come in and apply a color to the text, which kind of gives that nice rich shadow effect here. Now this is an example of a nice visual control that I've added. I've got kind of that hard graphic shadow. Because there's still text elements, no matter how large I make this, I can zoom on in on the content. It's going to remain resolution independent because it's still a font. It's still going to load very quickly, and no matter what the display I jump to, it's going to always be at that maximum resolution for the display. All right, it hasn't happened in a while, but I'm kind of out of tricks. So if there's any other general questions that we want to cover, let me know. Next week's session is all about mobile. So we'll talk a little bit more about creating desktop, smartphone, and tablet content that gets shared across those layouts. But in a nutshell, for your own mind, since we do have a little bit of time, and I don't want to bring you back necessarily if you have to not want to come here, since I'm speaking in circles today for some reason. If I wanted to take this content, let's just show this somewhat quickly. I'm going to grab everything we got here and copy it. And let's go back to this kind of blank website. And let's just add only those elements. So I'm going to paste them here on the page. Now as I'm working, let's just kind of show you this. I think it is meaningful because it's worth thinking about. I've got this gathering of elements. I'm going to take this gathering of elements here I'm going to copy it, and let's say I go to my site plan and I want to create a tablet instance of my design. I don't have much going on here, but I'll copy the pages from the desktop view, come on into my tablet view here. Now I may decide this is really great, but now that I'm on a tablet, things need to be smaller or larger. So HiDPI, I'm going to scale it down. This font icon, I may want it to be larger. And my two little graphic elements here, I'm going to need to make them a good deal larger as well. The beauty of what I'm doing is that these are shared elements across layouts. So my hypothesis is if I were to look into a folder of everything that's been output, I'm going to have one graphic element, which is HiDPI. I'm going to have one font in essence, so this is the web font. Again, it's going to export all of the icons in that web font, that self-hosted web font. These guys right here, I would see multiple instances in my export folder because these are images and it's going to need to render those additional images based on how I've scaled it. If it was rotated or cropped, would also affect how many instances that I see. But the good thing is if I go to my assets folder as I'm working up each of these layouts, I really only have one instance of each of those elements. So if I wanted to go in and change my SVG graphic, for example, although it occurs a few times in the site, I can always go in and relink to a different SVG image. I can see where it's being placed on the site by going to the asset, reveal it in the Finder, but the code is going to be very clean. If you're wondering how much junk is getting exported, the best way to find out is to pull that on file, and instead of uploading to FTP or Business Catalyst, go ahead and export as HTML, create a folder, and look in the assets folder. See how many instances of each image are there. And if you have questions, come to the forum and talk to us about it. We can help you look at ways to optimize it a little bit more. All right, I'm out of hot air today, which is pretty odd. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over here. We can end early. I'm happy to give you 12 whole minutes to yourself. What you do need to do is tell me if there was something you expected me to cover today and put it in the chat. Let me know how well the session covered the questions that you did have. We're not in the same room together, so it helps for me to get that feedback. And if there's topics you want to cover, let me know what those topics are. Next week, as I mentioned, we're doing mobile. We have a pretty good agenda going on. One mention I did not make that I do want to make, and I'm remiss actually, so hold on. I'm going to keep going for a second. I apologize. It's what I get for talking in my sleep today. So still sharing what I got going on here, I want to show you something, which is we started on Wednesdays to do a free widget a week. It's the second week we've done it. We picked something in the community that does probably relate to the jam session topic that we're covering. This week's free widget is available right now. If I go to Facebook, you can find where it is. I'm just going to go directly to the directory. So if I go to the Muse widgets directory and I search for mockup, it comes to us from the Muse Gain folks. This is a free mockup widget that you can download. I have downloaded it already into my system. So if I come into my library now, under mockup kits, I'm going to press and drag this on the canvas. What you have is what looks to be pretty much like a photograph, photographic quality to some extent. Let's say I wanted to show my portfolio and I want to show designs I have. We'll just stick with phone and desktop for the moment here. These are SVG elements, which mean from a screen resolution standpoint, if I wanted to put a screen here, or a lot of times you'll see folks will make this an actual slideshow. I can scale this freely without a problem. I can come in and add a slideshow here to actually rotate through, for example, all of my portfolio. But the beauty is no matter how I scale these elements, we're talking about SVG. So if it was loaded on tablet and desktop, all of the things we've talked about, this is an SVG element that's just going to load quickly and remain screen and resolution independent. No matter how much I zoom in on this apple, it's going to remain smooth. So that's this week's free widget. I encourage you to go grab it. It'll be free right now for another hour and 10 minutes. And we're going to continue to do that. So let us know what you think about that widget program if it's useful to you. I will go back to letting you speak. But let us know a little bit more if there are topics that you want to cover that you haven't heard of late, and what you thought about the session today. And I will see you a week from today, probably with a little more clarity to my brain, I promise. All right, hold on 1 second. I will grab the Connect recording, and in a few hours, the recording will be available on YouTube. So stand by. You're welcome, Valerie. Thanks for being here.